Why do you think the stat of 3 times more men and 4 times more women with disabilities die by suicide opposed to their non-disabled counterparts is so high? Is it as simple as being due to the associated symptoms with their conditions and the impact on their mental health, or is it more complicated due to a lack of support, isolation, purpose, and social care?
Trina, what do you think?
Right, I think it's really a combination of all those. I currently, along with PTSD and my normal bits and pieces, Nick obviously knows I've broken my ankle in 3 places and completely dislocated it. Now I know that pain sends those messages to your brain that causes pain. So I think it's that pain. I think very much so at the moment I feel completely isolated. So I think it's those feelings of being isolated, not being understood, that you get too serious, and friends and family just don't like to be around you when you hit those dark times because they don't know what to say, they don't know what to do. Yeah, it's a lack of support and services too, because there is niche support out there, but not if you class yourself as having a disability as well.
What do you think, Kris?
Again, I'm only going to go base it on my own life experiences, right? As some of you may know, I was extremely bullied as a child. I've gone through some very difficult scenarios when I was younger. I started self-harming from when I was young, and I'm not going to go into it too deep, but for myself, when I was going through the amount of emotional pain in my head, and when I did start self-harming, it actually eased the pain and the emotions in my head because I could physically look at the pain. I think I wanted to put that out there of why people self-harm, because of the reality is there's too much information going into our heads. So if we physically can see the pain, it actually means a lot more less, right?
It's a form of distraction and stimming in some ways.
You're absolutely right, Jade. It's a distraction. That's not necessarily a disability thing. I think that's more on the basis of just going through real traumas. My lived experiences, again, as I have to go by lived experience, is the fact of having a disability has always been an emotional, not necessarily for me or my family, but to me, how other people would always perceive me and look at me and have that judgment and belief, because from a people of authority, that they were actually right. And that has always kind of aided me into a point of why I never felt good enough, and never felt like I fit into society, right? I think that for me is something that we all, as disabled people, that we all go through, is the fact of we've kind of been led to believe that we're inadequate and we're not equal to our counterparts, and I think that has a massive part to play in why the suicide rate is so high within those with disabilities. Is the way we feel about ourselves, on how society is kind of dictated to us that this is the reason why it's so high. That's my 2 cents.
What do you think, Jade?
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I would say that if we particularly looked at the ratio with women and men, I think that there's obviously societal norms and expectations of the role you lead as a woman, for example, potentially looking at what's been seen to do as a woman, like family, look after family, cooking, cleaning, all that sides of things, and potentially having a physical disability or neurodiversity where you struggle with organisation and planning, you feel that you can't fulfil what you're deemed to do, for example. Just with regards to that side of things, obviously I think it's a very individual experience as well, depending on what type of disability somebody has, whether they were born with it or whether they've acquired a disability throughout their life, for example. that all of these things are going to have an impact. If obviously society is not accessible, and we talk about isolation as well, and about being able to integrate and get out and speak to other people, and there's not really any kind of niche support groups for disability and mental health as far as I'm aware, like meetups, and even if there was, there's the whole logistics of finding a venue that's accessible for all disabilities and trying to obviously cater that need as well, which there needs to be. So if you feel alone and isolated and you can't get out of your house, how are you supposed to improve on that mental state if you can't get out of your house? Obviously there is a bit more virtually now and things that have moved along, but it's still nowhere near what it needs to be.
What about you, Chandos? Where?
I think even before someone is told they're disabled or they're born disabled, like there's a lot of historical beliefs and values about what it's like to be a disabled person in the UK or in the world. So I think we're almost born into this community where we're told how our life should look and stuff, and if we don't fit that quota or that ideology, that we're somehow different, or like we're less than. And I know that shouldn't be the way, but like when I was growing up, like I became disabled at childhood, and like I was being told this is who you are because of your diagnosis. And so that mantra and that mindset was put into my mind from a young age. So I've grown up with it. And when I was younger, when you're being forced to, a value is being forced upon you, you tend to believe that, and you think, you internalize it a lot and you believe it to be true. Whereas until you have your own identity and you can distinguish what's my thought against someone else's, I think it's hard. And I think it comes down to that historical oppression of disabled people, but also the lack of services, because there is a lack of services for everyone, not just if you're disabled or not. So I think adding that pressure of having a disability that makes it more complicated, because it needs a bespoke, not one size fits all approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you made a good point, Jade, about whether you were born with disabilities or you're newly disabled. I'm newly disabled, so that transition and adjustment is a lot. I'm someone who's got no family around them, no friends physically around me, emotions that are built up in it, and the isolation and loneliness and all these kind of things. You haven't got anyone around you to support emotionally and to nurture you and to help with the adjustment. And because maybe mine is semi-reliant on a wheelchair, so if there's problems there, getting the equipment or whatever else, and you end up just trapped, and you feel trapped, laid on a bed. I can't get out because I haven't got the chair. I can't do this and I can't do that. And that's been a lot.
You have to push
Trina,
yourself extra as well. And when you're mentally not feeling well, you have fatigue and you don't feel well enough to do that. But then you have to push against that and about the physicality as well and accessibility. So it's tough.
I found it exhausting just going through like the paperwork and the bits and pieces that you need to do. Whether it's going through the whole PIP thing, universal credit, all the other bits and pieces that you got to do, trying to get Motability, trying to do all these other things, and I was so overwhelmed by it all, and there's a lot there. Like I feel I'm still managed suicidal ideation now. I still have suicidal thoughts most days, but I've learned how to kind of manage it a bit. But mine's pretty much like Trina said. Mine's because of the pain. Mine's more just being in so much pain every single day.
Yeah, wanting
it's
to escape.
Exhausting.
I can kind of relate to that. Having said, I do suffer with chronic illness, and I think there's a balance, isn't there? When you're still trying to fight your old thoughts, as well as the sad reality is my condition is not gonna get better. It's only going to get worse, and you kind of having to accept the fact that your condition is generally deteriorating and not getting better. You know, I spoke to a friend of mine recently, Javino, who is a personal trainer to people with disabilities. And he told me something, guys, that blew my mind. That every day there's a young boy that comes into the gym to basically work out, right? He knows that his condition is only getting worse, right? But he goes to the gym every single day to have the same strength as he has today that he will have tomorrow. His muscle is not going to get any better. It's not going to be anything worse. But he trains for the reason for this, not for this, but for this. And I think there's something about the fact of training our mind and how everything what we put into ourselves and what we see and what we reflect on has a massive responsibility for it. I know. Yeah, carry on, Jade. Sorry.
I was going to say he's obviously a great example of, like, if you've got that mindset and resilience. But the problem is we know through health services that it's the term use it or lose it, and obviously physicality, you need to be active to build your strength, and it's something, if not, it goes downhill. And obviously the further it goes downhill and the more rapid, obviously then there's a link with mental health as well. But it seems to be, even with health services, it's about accommodating and how can what's the bare minimum we need to do to pacify this person and not get the best out of them as well. I find that from my own experiences within postural management, and because I've got both healthcare and personal experience with that side of it, and there'd be plenty of times where people would want to, with like a really progressive condition like MND, they want to make the most out of their movement for as long as they have, and having things in place sooner rather than later would keep that ability for a much longer period of time. But it's the amount of time it takes to put anything in place, it's gone. And it's like that with anything, services wise.
It's that mindset. I think we all know about that through all the mental health awareness, and we know how much to train our minds. We know the importance. We know the value. It's then juggling that with real world and working and all the other bits and pieces. And I think just the reality of making that happen,
and accessible, like you say, Jade, for other people
services,
as
well, and with the services, it's I found it exhausting. We've mentioned a bit about touching on specific services around suicide for people with disabilities. Now, I'll be honest, I went through a period where I was going like, I still feel it a little bit now. It's no point me ringing up Samaritans because I don't feel like anyone there will really truly be able to empathize and know what I'm going through, you know, unless I'm extremely lucky and someone there who answered the phone has actually got lived experience of all, you know, similar symptoms and stuff like that. But the likelihood is I'm not going to get someone like that. And then, so for me, I'm like, well, you're not really going to be able to fully understand what I'm going through. So when you try and give me your general kind of responses and trying to empathize and be supportive and all this kind of stuff, I just don't feel it's going to cut it. Do you know what I mean? Which is where if we had a specific support for people with disabilities ran by people with disabilities, for example, then we know that when you have people with lived experience or similar lived experiences talking to one another, the rapport, the bonds, the trust immediately is so much higher, you know.
Do you think it is? Do you think then, Nick? So to answer you, to basically ask your question. Do you think lived experiences is so important in regards of basically suicide, like suicide with those within the disability community? Do you think that's really, really important? Because
absolutely. I think it obviously there's different levels of it. So, you know, crisis, then it has to be professionals and
Of course.
I think we'll all agree and say that signposting to professional services, even if it's just to get your name on the chart and get your name in a list, it has to be your first point of call. But if you're something like people experiencing suicidal thoughts, so this is thing generally that I would like to see. So there is nothing, you go to the doctor, they might give you antidepressants or whatever. But when you say to them, I'm having suicidal thoughts, they'll either try and get you on antidepressant type meds, or they'll say, if it gets worse, go to the crisis team. There's nothing in between. There's no, so then you're left with, right, I'm getting these suicidal thoughts. So what happens with this? Who can I speak to?
The problem is with medication, Nick, at the end of the day, if they're not looking at this is what I find a lot within mental health services across, is that if they're not looking at the reasons why or what the cause of it is, whether that be an actual symptom of your disability with regards to like neurodiversity, there's obviously a link to that, or whether it's to do with pain management and other things, they need to obviously giving medication out for antidepressants is masking it. It's just like, oh, here you go, let's not look at any other reason, take some tablets and go.
It's absolutely spot on. I've been on antidepressants for more years than I care to remember. Initially, it was depression. I've tried to come off them a few times. It was probably about 6 months ago. Nick knows I've gone through medical retirement from the police after 27 years. So about 6 months ago, I was dealing with, and I think Chandos said about this, identity. I completely lost my identity. Being a cop didn't define me as such, but it was a massive part of me. So I rang the doctors, and I was having suicidal ideation. I'd got no plans, no intention to take it any further because I'm sole parent of my daughter, and she's my world, and that's my why. That's what always keeps me here, even at my lowest ebb. But so I said to the doctor, I need you to have a look at my medication because I think it needs upping. I'm really not coping very well at the moment. And basically, I was pushing him to say, are you having thoughts? He didn't even ask me one question. So I got off he said, yeah, I'll just up your medication. And I just felt so like,
you don't even have a personalised conversation. It's just like robotic.
It was just absolutely dire. And then just going on to just briefly to what Nick you were saying about the systems, they're so archaic. I mean, PIP. Oh my God, it was devised in the 70s, wasn't it? I ended up going to a tribunal at court to get my PIP payment over a deficit of 2 points. Within 5 minutes of being in the courtroom, the judge said to DWP, have you got any representations? Because I'm going to award Miss Senese the 2 points, and I want to make the use of the rest of this hour to see if she's eligible for anything else. So it's it's those archaic systems, and
why put you through that extra stress as well? Like it's just unnecessary.
Because I have PTSD, and then being in a courtroom setting, I just spent the whole hour just crying, and I said, I'm really sorry, I can't actually stop this. I feel completely overwhelmed because this was substantial. And the judge took one look at it and said, so it's what are people like, what are bodies like the DWP doing? What training are they getting? Because they clearly have no empathy and they have no understanding.
So bringing this back on to Kris, because you dropped out a little bit there, buddy. Yes, lived experience. I think this is where community-based support groups, some kind of with the right safeguarding in places and bits and pieces. So when you're first experiencing suicidal thoughts, listen to their lived experiences. You can share if you want or not. I've seen it from running a men's peer support group, the power, the strength, the community, the rapport, the trust, and just how much, during the time that I ran the group, we saved at least 3 or 4 lives, where the guys are like, honestly, if you weren't here, I wouldn't be alive today. So lived experience, I think within that, like I say, not crisis, not anything up that, but low-level community-based suicide support, you know, or something like that. I think that is really important. So yes, I think there's a lot of good that can come from that, whilst also providing potentially paid work for people who've got lived experience and maybe still struggling with certain elements.
I was going to say, Nick, with regards to that about lived experience as well, my own resources that have helped me massively, which I've self-sourced, is to find myself a coach, like specialises in ADHD and autism, that has lived experience himself and potentially have experienced suicide ideation or mental health as a result to that. And there is literally no better therapy than to speak to somebody that understands and gets it, because you can speak to people that don't, and it makes you feel probably more isolated and pushed off and more different by speaking to somebody that doesn't get how you feel or understand. And I think finding a community myself of people that experience the similarities to what I do, it makes me far more accepting of my symptoms and better management of my symptoms as well, rather than being surrounded by people that don't feel, even like we talk about family and support, like they don't get it.
Which brings us nicely onto the question 2. What support are you aware of? This is specifically suicide support. Are you aware of? Is there something specifically for people with disabilities? And would you know where to go if you experience suicidal thoughts now? Throw that to you, Chandos.
I don't know of any specific, but I'm aware of the Hub of Hope, which is a database where you can search by your postcode, and you can search on specific search terms. So like your own, like I've got OCD, so I can put in that and it will show me all the services related to OCD in my area, or other mental health related conditions to that. And that's really bespoke to you, so it can be tailored around your needs, and that does signpost you to any emergency or related support lines like Text Shout or the Samaritans, which work for some people, obviously. And obviously, like that, there's a whole database of services. So that's my first point of call if I was struggling, would be to go there, and that offers information on paid for services, they're private, but also NHS services, which in my experience hasn't been anything specific to my disability. It's been a service for young people or a service for adolescents that have had to tailor around me.
I would have said Samaritans, although that's not the route that I went through. I sadly, when I firstly attempted suicide, I was rushed to hospital. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I was rushed into hospital, and then from there I had to then go essentially go and be in hospital for just under 12 weeks. And that's when I went into psychiatric care, and it was a very, very frightening experience to go into psychiatric care for the first time, and the type of individuals that you would see there as well. And it was something that, for myself, I was like, I don't belong here, but the reality is I did.
You needed to be there, but you didn't feel represented or understood in that scenario, because it is so variable. Like it was
a scary experience for me, right? But I knew in myself, and I was saying, why am I here? Why am I in here? I don't want to be here. But knowing in retrospect, it was probably the safest place for me to be, because those thoughts were still very, very strong.
But do you not find it's the same approach regardless? Like, for example, it makes you question and wonder, like the approach to the services is the same for somebody maybe that's acting violently to other people. Like, it's still a mental health condition, but obviously you're put in with people like that as well. And then it makes you think, well, I'm not a bad person, and it makes you feel worse.
I saw all walks of life in there, and I think for me it probably didn't help the fact that I was just drugged up to my eyeballs, looking outside of a window, and not really understanding life itself. I know that's quite the what's the word that I'm looking for? It's quite dramatic, but I think for me and where I was in my life at that period, I suppose that's what they had to do. It was interesting to what Nick was saying about the representation aspect of it, about the, you know, seeing people like yourself going through those lived experiences. I've got to be honest with you, I've never seen that in 45 years of my life. I've never seen that in my life. And you've challenged me today. I'm not going to lie, you've actually challenged me in this conversation. And I think that's a good thing. And because if I'm honest with you, Nick, you know, to all of you, for someone that's very, very open to talk about my disability, very open about my own life, and open book, that's why I call myself open book. I've never heard that before. And it's actually got me now thinking, wow, why have I not heard that before? You know, with all the people that I'm around every day, and I've never heard anyone speak about this thing. That's quite scary. And yeah, you've challenged me. And
are the mental health services even trained on how to approach disability, like from
I
an
don't
approach?
believe they are
No.
not properly anyway. Not properly.
No,
They might have had
basic training, inclusion
basic
training, or something
exactly.
like that, from a
Yeah.
point of language, not
Exactly.
approach.
Yeah.
I agree.
What about yourself, Jade?
So with mine, there's I kind of went, what's the saying, arse about face side of things. So like I had a physical disability. Well, I've had my neurodiversity my whole life, but non-diagnosed. But then had a fibromyalgia from 10 years ago, sort of thing. And then I felt like with regards to that, trying to battle against the fatigue and stuff, there's not really anything to approach. But since I've been diagnosed with ADHD and I'm on the pathway for an autistic diagnosis as well, I think that self-research and understanding symptoms has been literally the only thing that has helped me. And I suppose speaking to other people in the communities that have had similar experiences, but even with that, with my own experiences when I've had to call crisis teams and said that I'm neurodiverse and this is how I'm feeling, they literally have no understanding or the approach to do it. And if anything, they like to, even psychologists like to use it as an example to misdiagnose, because they're not even educated or specialised in neurodiversity. They're just specialised in mental health. So the amount of misdiagnoses I've had and had to be go through CAMS to contest stuff like medication and stuff they've tried to put me on. It's just that's a battle. Like, mental health services should not be a battle. It should be something that's easy for you to get services to make you feel better. But I've been on the phone crying to psychologists and to people like that because I'm not getting the assistance that I need, and it's not tailored to my disability. So,
isn't it, when you look at Samaritans, when you look at, you know, crisis teams, we've all got to ring up, you know, and the person on the end of the phone, I know we've got in Northamptonshire, we've got a phone hub. Most regions kind of have some sort of it, which is how you access IAPT services through your NHS trust. And the MIND deliver the training, and the training for the people who are answering the phone calls, they get minimum training, you know, when dealing with these phone calls. And I've never heard, when I've been researching all this, about training around neurodiversity. So when you're speaking to someone on the crisis call, you know, on the phone line, to ensure that you actually, you know, to that they fully understand, and how do you, you know, that's something that's really worth looking at.
There's a massive link, and even been on the media at the moment. There's a massive link between neurodiversity and suicide ideation, actually just as a symptom. So without any cause such as pain or anything like that, it just can be to do with chemical imbalances, neurotransmitters and stuff can cause these kinds of obsessive thoughts as part of your condition, a form of stimming, wanting to escape. But it's not even looked at all. Like and for example, like one of the within addiction, so I've had family experiences with that as well. Like, I'm pretty sure neurodiversity is genetically linked. I've suggested that to a family member that is has again tried to commit suicide, is an addict, has put themselves through rehab, and even the rehab don't look at the cause for the behavior. They're not, oh, okay, no, this person's neurodiverse. Don't even look at it. Even though I've said he's likely to be neurodiverse, please can you look into this as a strategy and an approach? Do not look at it at all. They look at coping strategies and all the standard procedural stuff, which for me, CBT therapy has been completely useless. I didn't do homework at school. I'm not going to do it at home, and it's definitely not going to make me feel any more mentally well.
Although I do need to say that was for your personal
Me
experience.
personally, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
but I mean, like, I
yeah.
will still say this, and it's still suggested. So I'm not. CBT is great for some people, and if you're in a organised place and state of mind, I can understand why doing that sort of things and putting things down will help. But for some people, it isn't, and it's not always the solution. So that's what my point is. Not this. It's not personalised at all. And I think that genuinely having a mindset that there could be other underlying things that can cause mental health issues and conditions, having that as a consideration could be a massive factor, but it's not even
absolutely
considered.
So let's start putting this into a positive for people now that we've completely gone, it's all crap and there's no support. So what helps you manage on those low days, whatever the reasons, if it's generally poor mental health or your symptoms are really flaring up, what helps you cope? Trina?
It's going on kind of what Kris alluded to. It's the representation. It's finding your tribe, finding people who understand you. And Nick, you helped me massively last year. It was just a message that I sent to you saying that I couldn't come to your mental health. What's the word?
The event.
Yeah. Jade, obviously I have fibromyalgia too. I've got horrendous brain fog at the moment, so I can't remember words at the moment. And you picked up on how low I was just from a series of messages, and you gave me hope, just to sort of put my ideas up a bit and carry on. It's finding those people that actually understand where you're coming from, and I think finding people who have got bags of empathy help. I tried to contact it was a police charity. I did a lot of work with them when I was still at work. I found them really good and found some really supportive individuals there. But I rang them up to try and get some counselling earlier on in the year. And they went through everything, all the conditions I'd got. And this person totally lacked empathy. And after crying on the phone for about an hour and a half, I went, no, I'm not interested, because they just didn't get me. So it's finding those people who do get you. And sometimes it's not necessarily, there isn't someone else perhaps who has got undiagnosed ADHD, PTSD, physical conditions, fibromyalgia, mental health issues as well. It's hard to find someone who perhaps understands every facet of my life, but it's finding people in a near enough similar situation who have had similar experiences. I've had those thoughts of suicidal ideation, I've had those plans, I've attempted. It's those people that help you get out of it.
Yeah.
It's trying to stay away from the mood hoovers, the people who just suck you down and get you even lower. It's finding those positive people who know how to bring you back up again.
What about you, Chandos? What helps you get by those tough days?
I think I used to take sertraline and that did nothing. And then since I've been put on citalopram, that sort of helps me a little bit more. It doesn't work entirely, but it's that like stepping stone for me to then say it gives me a bit more like hope, and then I can put in place things like Jade and Alan will know if I'm having a really bad day, I'll just message them and say I'm going for a nap. Is that okay? And that gives me like on my way when I'm working on days with them, like if I'm honest with them, like being honest with people and like making sure that I know my own boundaries like really helps, because the days where I'm really struggling and my mind is just full of all these thoughts, I do just need a nap to take me away from those thoughts, even if it's like an hour little like power nap or whatever. Or if it's things like podcasts, like there's a really good podcaster called Jay Shetty, and he went off and became a monk. He like talks about mind and well-being all the time. in his podcast, but he interviews people who I wouldn't feel a connection with if I saw them on the TV or on a TV show or whatever. When you hear their lived experience and behind the scenes, like you connect with them a lot, and like their feelings of self-doubt that I've had, like I've had similar and things like that, and I use like that as like a bit of I learn from them and learn from their experiences, and sometimes they'll say something like really impactful that I'll take away, and I remember that on a day when I'm really struggling, or things like having a time to go for a walk in the evening, or like just sing along to a song that I know I can't sing, but in my mind I'm just
dancing.
Yeah, or a TikTok dance. It's those little things where like I just give myself a bit of playful energy where I could just be myself, be authentic and stuff.
Awesome. I like that boundaries, really knowing your boundaries, and accepting when it's all right to go, actually today's really crap, there's no way, so what's the point of forcing yourself?
I don't always
Go on, mate.
I don't always get it right. Like there's been days where I'll power through and I'll just carry on, or I'll just ignore it, and then I feel worse at the end of it. But like I found that, especially since like experiencing a hate crime last year, like having that honesty and saying, actually, I need a me day, I need time for myself, and yes, I'll get the work done, but it will take a bit more time. Like having that power to say that has been really motivating for me in a way.
Cool. What about you, Kris? You're bound to have loads of these.
I certainly have, my friends. Firstly, I want to say about the boundaries. It's so important, so important. So for me, being autistic, I learned strategies from when I was extremely young on how to deal with things. So with me, I map out my year. So when I say I map out my year, I map out my year. So I'm already in 2020. I'm already into next year with things that I planned, right? And that's simple things, as you talk about the every hour I go for a 5-minute walk. I walk around the block when I'm at work every hour. From the fact of for me, strategy is everything. It's so key.
Can I ask you a question with that, Kris, if you don't mind? Just because I'm really relating to what you're saying with certain things, but because I've got both, there's sometimes a bit of a conflict. Do you find that if you do plan something and it doesn't go to how you want it to go to, that can then be a massive crash? And if so, how do you stop that from happening?
I think you have to put that into your daily plan. The fact of the matter is things are going to go wrong, and because in the early stages when things didn't go wrong, like for instance, my work are phenomenal. I start work at 7 in the morning and I finish at 3. And the reason why I start at 7 in the morning is because I actually don't see people on the train, right? It's very empty. When I get onto the tube in the morning, it's pretty empty. And when I go home at night, I miss the rush hour. So
Right.
that is part of taking away that stress and strain and anxiety away from me, that I can start my work and I can start my shift at 7 a.m. in the morning, and by 8:30, I've done my morning tasks. When people come into the office at 9 o'clock, I'm sitting there having my breakfast, right? So I'm already relaxed and calm. So now when I do start my checking my emails from say like from 9 to 9:30. Now I said from 9 to 9:30. So I'm already giving myself that space and that grace to actually understand that there could be a situation on the train, right? And it might put me out a little bit for the moment, but giving myself that grace for half an hour.
What if it's something big though, like impact? So if, say for example, you have like a big thing coming up, and then it's like, so I really struggled with when my wedding got cancelled twice,
Right.
like really massively
Right.
took a mental health toll, because it was like a month's notice, and
Absolutely.
my head couldn't get around the fact that this is what I've planned, I've done everything in place for this, and that's probably when I've been really, really unwell, sort of thing. There's been other things, but it's usually if something that's I've anticipated and put effort into planning and trying to be safe by structuring and organising it, and then something has happened where it hasn't happened. That's
I get it. Like, I think for me, I have to just keep going forward. you know, I think for my own mental health, I'm a person. If I didn't have that strategy, I would be an
Then
absolute
make another plan.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'd
Okay.
have because and I think, you know, I even you know, even down to the fact of, you know, every Sunday when I sit down for an hour and I map out everything, I go through everything continually and
That sounds good.
strategically. I it's so important for me that I because I look at the end of the day, you know what, Nick, you said something very important about being around people. The sad truth and the reality is I'm not around a lot of people. I don't have a lot of friends, and I would love to turn around and say, you know, you know, I think a lot of people look at me as quite sociable, but actually I'm a very lonely person, and
Yeah.
I've got no problem of saying that, because at the end of the day, you know, being someone who is autistic, I struggle with people as much as it might sometimes it may look like I've got that full of friends and I'm doing all this stuff. The majority of the stuff that I do, I'm by myself, and I'm okay by that. And I'm actually, you know, loving who I am as a person on this self-love journey that I've been on.
Yeah.
I also understand, and this is the hard part now, about social acceptance in myself. I'm a 45-year-old man, and I'm pretty sure that I'm never going to get married, right? I'm pretty sure that, you know, that I'm not going to live the life of what I have kind of imagined and dreamed in my life, and what my other counterparts have. And I have to accept that. But within accepting that, I also found a new lease of life, a lease of life where I could be dedicated to my journey and to help others. And that for me gives me that peace of mind. So I think for me, that's so important that with the stuff that I do, and as I said, I do have grace moments. So every Sunday, everything is off. Social media is off. I'll have my phone on, but I'm not answering it every 5 minutes. If I don't want to speak to someone, don't take it personal. It just means
Your time.
it's my time, and
Yeah.
everything that I do is just so important. So for me, strategy is the number one priority for me. You know, my goodness.
Cheers, buddy. What about you, Jade?
To relay with what Kris is saying, I think personally for me, acceptance of limitations and that I'm not going to be certain things that I want to do. I think that's been having a self-discovery and understanding of myself and journey. I'm not nowhere near where Kris is yet, but that gives me hope to think, because I have that longing to have things being more planned and structured and wanting to do that sort of stuff. Like, I know that's what I have to do, and it's going to take me a while to get to that point. But even from a point of recognizing that if I have suicide ideation and that is a symptom, it will be short-lived for a period of time, potentially even within an hour or so I can feel okay. And also, if I'm physically not able to do something, having that acceptance and not thinking, oh, I'm not doing good enough, I need to do better, I need to provide for my child, I need to do this, I need to do the dishes or clean up, even if I'm physically not feeling well enough to, taking more time for myself. And I still struggle with that now to some extent, because one part of my brain thinks, no, you've got to do it, and then the burnout is far worse. So for example, I can't travel in a car for more than a couple of hours without having a flare up the next day. Like, I pretty much feel bedbound with it. I feel rough today for that reason, because I've come back from Norfolk yesterday. And just having that acceptance of, actually, I feel shit, I need to ask Alan to pick that up off the floor because my back's bad, or do certain things, and delegating things as well, being a bit more assertive and accepting that you need help, I think.
Yeah, it's for me, it's definitely learning more about who you are, what you can and can't do, acceptance, accepting bad days, accepting you are the way that you are right now, accepting that crisis, when you go into that really bad period, it's not going to last all the time. It is a phase. I now truly believe that, and that has now got to me to the point where when I am really bad, I cling on to the fact that I know I've just got to cling on for this next half hour, couple of hours, and then I'll get through it, and then it'll ease off. You know, I've acknowledged it and accepted it. That's made it a lot easier now to know that it does fade off. And then for me, the two biggest ones is purpose and hope. So purpose is huge for me and really keeps me going. Well, I don't care about me. I don't care about my life. I don't care about any of my stuff. But I will fight and I will keep turning up and I will keep going on to keep raising awareness and to help other people and to do all the things. That is my purpose. So purpose is massive.
Yeah.
And now I've personalized hope. So I've got like almost a dozen little hopes. Some are small, some are quite big, but they're really personal to me. So instead of someone else telling me there's hope, I've gone, okay,
What's your
hope? What am I actually hoping for? You know. So now like I said, I've got about a dozen hopes, and I really truly believe in them. So I cling on to that. If for whatever reason the purpose isn't working, I cling on to that hope, grizz it out for a couple of hours, and then when it eases off, ensure I do something positive, even if it's going out for a ride on a wheelchair or walking around the field or just getting out of the flat. Do something positive afterwards, so you're not focusing at the end of the day, I had this really bad period. You can then kind of shift your mindset a little bit and go, well, I've still got out of the house for 5 minutes. I've still got some fresh air. I still did something. So they're the ones that really help for me. And final ones, what I'd like each of you to do is give a message of hope to our audiences. What message of hope when you've been bad? What has someone said to you, or what really resonates with you that you'd like to share with them?
Let's start off. Don't let your past dictate your present, and what you do in your present will build you a better future.
Love that. Top man. Totally believe in that.
That's so good, yeah.
Trina?
For me, it's tomorrow's a new day. I think that goes back to when I first had my daughter, and I was feeding her constantly, and the middle of the night felt so long. I felt so lonely. I didn't know what to do with this screaming child. And my mum always kept saying, Trina, tomorrow's another day. Doesn't matter how long the night seems, it's going to be a new day tomorrow and you start afresh. And that's so true. And it goes back to Nick, what you were saying. You know, we have to ride out the short, painful times, knowing that better is going to come, and it always does come.
Awesome. Chandos, my friend.
I'm going to say what my friend told me when I was at university, because I went through a really up and down period through uni. Like I started and I was fine, and then I had my operation, and then I was told I wouldn't pass my degree, so I just to give up and stuff. And then like when you're experiencing disability at university, especially quite a small university like I went to, if you're struggling with your mental health, you're judged automatically, whether it's intentional or not. And I would internalize it, and I would try and isolate myself as much as I could, but still try and be sociable and still try and fit in with everyone. And it just, at times people would look at me and judge me a lot. But my friend told me, he said, do you? Those two words, like every time I would struggle and I'd be with him, he just say, just do you. Like if you got to have a day where your compulsions are really bad, you're washing your hands every 5 minutes. Like, no, that's not ideal. But if that's how you're coping on that day, just be yourself. And then on a day when you're really good and you're not, like when you're feeling really good and stuff, like embrace that and just do you. Like it's so adaptable and stuff. And I think that works for everyone. Like if you're having a day when you don't feel like talking to anyone, do you, but don't isolate yourself from the world around you. Try and have a conversation with a friend, or just like reach out to someone who you feel connected with, that you can be open and honest with, because it really helps, even if it's a work colleague or friend.
Yeah, I've started using that a lot actually. Do you? You do you, whatever that looks like, however it is, do you. And if your real friends, your people who love you and understand you and accept you for who you are, if someone says to you, you know, it's a great thing to say to someone, don't worry about upsetting us. You do you. When you're better, you know, get in touch, or we can do something when you're better. That's a great one, Chandler. Thanks for that, buddy. Jade.
I've pretty much been panicking the whole time everyone else is talking because I didn't have anything pre-prepped in my mind. But I would just say that give yourself time. Self-acceptance is key to any kind of recovery, and you're not alone. A lot of people feel the same way. I think that there's definitely support in community, and trying to find your community. I know we've obviously said that has been a bit of a struggle for people, but it's apparent from this conversation that we're all having that if there was more resources and support and doing more of things like this, potentially could help other people out there to know. I think for me personally, just knowing there's other people out there that feel and experience the same way that I do has made me feel a lot more human and accepting of my feelings.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Jade. That's exactly what the lived experience library is all about. You know, it's giving an opportunity for people to share their story. Like, they'll be pinning Kris down soon, and we're going to meet up and have a day, and then
Absolutely.
It really does help. Just to hear someone else saying things that's been going on in your mind that you've been thinking about, but you haven't had the chance or the
courage to talk about it, even
say,
though some people don't,
say
do
it
they?
out loud. So
I've had
I've
conversations
had so
with family members where they've been like, oh, when they've, like, particularly one family member where they've had a drink, they've opened up a bit and said, oh, I think of these really horrible things of happening to people. And like, you do realise a lot of people have that fault. A lot of people think these things. Like, it's quite normal. And I think you obsessing on your own thoughts sometimes can get you in a dark place as well, not realising that there is people out there that are understanding if we all just spoke about it a bit more.
Exactly, and that's how you break down taboos, stigmas, and the rest of it. If everyone knew just how often and normal it is to have all these kind of thoughts going on, if people knew just how many others have suicidal thoughts, even if it's just a flash of people be better off without me, and it's a fraction of a second and it goes, the amount of people, it wouldn't be as such of a taboo thing, you know.
Yeah,
it would totally bring it down to earth almost. I don't know, it's,
yeah,
you know, it's really important. And I just wanted to kind of to wrap this up and to highlight again to people out there who's watching and listening to this, is there is help and support out there. We're not saying there's no help and there's no support, because there is. You've got Samaritans, Text Shout, you've got Papyrus, you've got Beyond Youth, you've got Campaign Against Living Miserably. There's so many. Hub of Hope, Chanda said, is a great starting place. And actually, for mental health and suicide, I would recommend to go Hub of Hope first before Google, because it's very overwhelming if you just put that stuff into Google. Or find a local community group, which is local people. And
how would you
they
do
might
that,
not have
Nick?
a website.
Where would a place to go to try and find your local community group? Usually, just
Facebook.
Okay.
Absolutely, Facebook, because if they don't have a website, they're pretty much guaranteed to have a page on Facebook. Do you know what I mean? And that's certainly what I've done when I've been moving around or visiting other people. The first thing I do is search on Facebook for what mental health groups or whatever is in a certain area. And you always come across them, and that is actually a really good thing, has been a great resource. You have got, if you're in crisis or you know someone who is, 999, you can go down to your A&E. There's a great grassroots suicide prevention have got a great app, so take a look at that. And we'd love to hear your comments. And with myself, the guys, and Disability Expo, we're going to be looking into this more and more and more. I totally believe in that, and it's keeping me alive. And we're still doing stuff. And these amazing people. Trina, thank you ever so much, darling. You are a legend for still coming on when you're feeling so crap.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes. Kris, thanks ever so much. I know you're shattered, my friend, and it is so lovely to see your happy, smiling face. It always warms me up, my friend, whenever I see you.
No. Love you all. I love you all. Thank you, Nick.
Chandos and Jade, again, ever so much. Thank you for arranging this and allowing me to kind of go on this journey with you. I think it's really important. And yeah, selfish plug. Check out the Lived Experience Library on YouTube. # just saying. And take care.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Thanks for the suggestion, and hopefully we can campaign and get some really good resources and support out there. Thank you.